The Mapuche Nation lies in the area known as the Southern Cone of South America. The area is now occupied by both Argentina and Chile. The Mapuche and their culture have been resilient for more than 4 centuries, having resisted multiple military attacks and political pressures.
The Mapuche are one of the largest indigenous groups in South America. Still today, there are about 1 million Mapuche living in Chile and around 100,000 in Argentina.
In the 16th century, the conquistador Don Diego de Almagro invaded the Mapuche with an army of soldiers on horseback. It was an easy victory for Diego de Almagro and his men. On January 6, 1641, following a nearly 100-year conflict of bloody battles, the Mapuche Nation and the Spanish Empire signed the Treaty of Quilín. The treaty recognized the territorial autonomy of the Mapuche people, the first and only indigenous nation in South America whose sovereignty was legally recognized. Although they were one of the few indigenous tribes who did not succumb to the Spanish conquistadors, the situation of the Mapuche is tenuous to this day.
Well, I'd like to educate people in North America about the Mapuche. They're a very important indigenous group, an important culture with a very interesting history, and still, active and present today, still struggling to maintain their culture and preserve their rights in Chile and Argentina. And I just think it's a very interesting and important group that people in North America almost know nothing about.
The lasting legacy of the Mapuche can be seen in David Irving's collection at the Littleton Museum, in the artifacts they've left behind and those they continue to create.
David built this collection, this wonderful collection of art and culture of the Mapuche people by getting to know them, by going down to Chile, going to Argentina, visiting and meeting many of the Mapuche, and collecting from them.
Most of my interest is focused on textiles, and I used to collect more Navajo and Pueblo weavings from the American Southwest. But about 8 years ago, I really turned my focus almost exclusively to the Mapuche in South America, because they're like the Navajo, they're great weavers and silversmiths, and artistically their work is interesting, but also culturally it's a fascinating history. Coming from an anthropology background, I also like to collect more ethnographic objects as well. Equestrian gear, the spiritual items, the men's equipment, domestic utensils, and things like that. So it presents a fuller picture of the whole culture.
When you tour the exhibit, you'll see in the cases the beautiful pieces that are mounted certain ways that were, each mount for each piece has been custom built by a team of people I work with here at the museum. I always tell people, I come up with the ideas, but they're the people that make this thing work. There's a great team of 2 guys in the shops and 2 ladies from our collection center that just really work well with me. We work well together, and we just always produce these nice exhibits.
The spiritual leader, or Machi, plays a central role in Mapuche culture. The Machi is the mediator between the natural and spiritual worlds. People travel many miles to consult with a Machi on issues of health, spirituality, or personal problems.
One of her most important objects is the drum they call the kultrun, and this is one of the Machi's drums, and it's plays a prominent part in all their ceremonies. And interestingly, the drum is just made of carved wood and leather, but they always have inside a bunch of objects like bells and pieces of old broken jewelry, some sacred stones, things like that, so that when the drum is moved around, it sounds like a rattle as well as a drum.
While women typically served as spiritual leaders, most other positions of leadership were held by men. The men were fierce warriors who spent considerable time and energy on economic pursuits.
The men's world among the Mapuche evolved mainly around warfare and their equestrian activities, as well as raising and trading cattle and horses. And this case contains some of the artifacts that pertain to the men's world, in particular, some of the knives and other weapons, and pipes, and some of the men's jewelry items. But I think one thing that is kind of interesting to me is that the Mapuche also had a hockey game. They had a form of field hockey that they played, and these are a couple of the hockey sticks and the ball they used that's made out of a piece of burl wood. But they played this game as a form of recreation and to keep in shape for their military activities, as well as to solve disputes among neighboring groups of Mapuche. So for those hockey fans out there, this will be something of interest. The Mapuche have a long history of smoking some kind of native tobacco, and pipes are made of stone and ceramic are found in archaeological sites. And when they started working silver, they started making the pipes out of silver as well. So we have a couple of examples here of the later silver pipes.
While any metal objects were exceedingly rare among the Mapuche in pre-Columbian times, the arrival of the Spanish invaders meant the extraction of huge quantities of gold and silver from Mapuche lands. Spanish forts and towns were established throughout South America, and an ample supply of coinage helped fuel the new economy. Having no practical need for the cash economy, the Mapuche amassed large quantities of silver coins and utilized the raw material in silversmithing. Silver was preferred over gold for two reasons. First, the Mapuche quickly learned that those who possessed gold were more vulnerable to a conquistador's attack. And second, the color of silver symbolized the highest levels of purity and power in Mapuche culture.
Probably the high point of Mapuche silversmithing was women's jewelry. And there are a number of very distinctive forms that they developed, and over the years they became associated with the Mapuche. These large silver breastplates went through a series of style changes over a couple of centuries, but essentially that's probably the most characteristic piece of women's jewelry.
The women's shawl pin, also known as the tupu, has been used since pre-Columbian times. Early tupus would have been made from thorns or sticks and would have been used to fasten a shawl around the shoulders.
The tupu, or shawl pin, was also something that every woman wore. It was small or large depending on their wealth or their status, or I should say the wealth or status of their husband. But it's a form that was adopted from the Inca. Another thing are the women's earrings, and the most distinctive form of those are these large rectangular plaques, sometimes maybe 4 by 5 inches, that the women wore. And then they wore these silver chains around their heads, called a trarilonco, with the pendants hanging down over their forehead. Well, I'd like people to know who the Mapuche are, since they are one of the major indigenous cultures in the Americas. And in North America, they're almost completely unknown.
It's a collection of weavings, of silver items, of horse gear, household items, and we just think that it's a culture that the people of Colorado may not have been exposed to, and we invite you to come to the show, and it's just an absolutely fabulous collection.
David Irving's collection of Mapuche artifacts can be seen in the Littleton Museum's Changing Gallery through January 13th. The museum is located at 6028 South Gallup Street. Hours are Tuesday through Friday from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., Saturdays from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m., and Sundays from 1 to 5 p.m. It is closed Mondays and holidays.
You'll see beautiful examples here of the Mapuche people's artistic capabilities and the things that they do with the beautiful weavings behind me, the beadwork, the things that they did in the past, and they're just still doing today, which is just amazing. Fascinating people. I'm sure you're going to love this exhibit. It's going to be one of our highlights I think we've had here at the Littleton Museum for some time.